member for Flamborough-Glanbrook.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I must say at the outset that the prayer that began our session this morning, that we would be mindful of making good laws and serving Canadians, has never meant so much to me, and I think many of my colleagues here today, than any time it's ever been said from the Speaker's chair. While I'd like to thank my colleagues and members opposite for their thoughts and words on this deep ethical, moral, legal, and religious question, and while I may not agree with all the points that have been made thus far, I don't doubt for one second that the comments of all members are truly heartfelt, genuine, reflective, and respectful. Unfortunately, Madam Speaker, I do not have time to address all the concerns with this bill, such as, but not limited to, as my colleague from Lethbridge has so eloquently articulated, the poisonous change in our cultural mindset this bill will likely encourage, reducing the value of life to a measure of ability or function rather than its inherent worth and dignity, and causing Canadians who would never have considered taking their own life before to do so. As the member from Scarborough-Guildwood mentioned, this bill will be under expansionary pressure from the day it comes into effect, and where we could end up is troubling. The peril that I do not think has been fully addressed, that those in vulnerable communities could find themselves within. As I said, Madam Speaker, because time is limited, I'm going to focus on two issues, but again, my serious concerns are not limited to these alone. First, the regrettable absence of more discussion and action on palliative and hospice care as a precursor to this legislation. Hear, hear. Second, the need and the duty of all members here to respect and protect those physicians and healthcare professionals that object on conscience. Before I get into these 2 points, Madam Speaker, I want to offer my reflections on where we've come from on this issue. It was only 6 years ago that we debated this same issue and voted down the private member's bill C-384 of a former member of this House. It should be noted that this was the second attempt at the same private member's bill by the former member who had previously introduced C-407. I will say that I voted against and spoke out against the bills, not only because of my own personal convictions, but also because of my steadfast belief that those bills did not uphold the moral obligation we have as parliamentarians to protect the vulnerable and the inherent dignity of all life. Bills C-384 and Bill C-407 were seriously flawed because they set us down a path of unintended consequences. They were that slippery slope that's been spoken so often of here in this chamber regarding the debate of ethical dilemmas for our families, doctors, and healthcare workers would face. Speaker, my reservation then is sustained today. Why isn't there more emphasis on palliative care? It's not a better way to support quality palliative and end-of-life care for Canadians so they'll never need to think that euthanasia or assisted suicide is the only option or better option for their suffering. Is it not our duty to uphold the value and dignity of life in this manner? In my own home community of Hamilton, we have outstanding organizations like Emmanuel House and the Bob Kemp Hospice who work on a daily basis to make end-of-life better for people. I know hospices are doing outstanding work in all the communities across this country. So while I recognize, Madam Speaker, that in the view of Supreme Court's Carter decision, we're faced with a new reality, one where we need to respect their decision vis-a-vis the charter rights of those in dire circumstances while still ensuring the dignity of life is upheld, I'm very concerned that there's no further investigation, no rigorous effort to enhance palliative and invest in hospice construction in advance of this legislation or in conjunction with it. Hear, hear. Speaker, while the federal government's response to the Supreme Court's Carter decision makes reference to the need to support improvements of a full range of end-of-life care options, it does little about it other than acknowledging it as a non-legislative response. Speaker, I don't think that's good enough, and I believe all Canadians don't think that's good enough either. Instead of a vague reference to a multi-year health accord that includes home care and palliative care as one option, where was the commitment in the throne speech? Where was the commitment in the budget? Wasn't there. If the commitment is serious, why is it not backed up with funding? Speaker, this is the missing piece. If we're going to go down the legislative path of physician-assisted dying because of charter rights, then we in this place have a duty, and the Government of Canada has a duty to have first acted on palliative and hospice care. Hear, hear. Speaker, that was the viewpoint of 2 Senate studies, which I cited back in 2010 when I spoke out against Bill C-384. First, in 1995, there was the Special Senate Committee on Euthanasia and Assisted Suicide that, in its report of life and death, made a number of recommendations to improve access to palliative care services, standards of care, and training of healthcare professionals. In 2000, the Senate Committee on Social Affairs, Science and Technology tabled another report titled Quality End of Life, the Right of Every Canadian, which again recommended a strategy and vast improvements to palliative and end-of-life care, as well as support for family caregivers, home care, research, and surveillance. Speaker, it breaks my heart, and I know the hearts of all members in this House, that people are suffering. Just this past summer, in the middle of the election, I watched my own younger brother succumb to the ravages of lymphatic cancer. And I was grateful for the care, understanding, and compassion of everyone at Emmanuel House, the hospice at which he stayed in his final days. Speaker, I know that this bill attempts to address those individuals who have given up hope. Yet I believe there are most often better ways to address their suffering. To do everything possible with palliative and hospice care to give a modicum of hope, comfort and peace to those suffering at the end of their life and their families who are suffering too is our obligation. Once again, I believe this discussion should have preceded this bill. Speaker, the other point and final point I wanted to touch on today is one I know other members have already raised, and please allow me to amplify their concerns. And that is the protection of physicians' conscience rights, and quite frankly, for the other healthcare professionals and caregivers on a doctor's team who might be placed in the circumstances that this bill would allow. First, I don't think there's a shred of doubt that we must offer clear and undisputable protections to those who object on ethical, moral, or religious grounds. In these matters of life and death, that is more than the right thing to do, it's the only thing to do. Second, I believe to send this important signal to the medical community, to families, to individuals suffering, and to all Canadians, these conscience protections for physicians must be included in the bill itself and not just in the preamble. The bill needs to include a punitive measure for those who would seek to pressure, force, or coerce anyone to assist someone in taking their life. Speaker, thank you for the opportunity to offer these reflections. I know every member of the House will be doing a lot of thinking, soul-searching, and prayerful consideration as we grapple with this legislation. I sincerely hope and pray that we continue to do so with extreme caution and care. Thank you, and God bless Canada.
Questions and comments, questions et commentaires.